The 2018 quarterback draft class was heralded as one of the greatest in recent memory leading up to the draft day that year. Not only was the talent level so high, but it was deep with 5 first-round quarterbacks being taken. Teams were passing on quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes in 2017 because they knew if they held out for 2018 class, they'd be able to get a true star. So how did it end up working out for those teams and the quarterbacks they ended up selecting? Well, after a historical 0-16 season, the Cleveland Browns ended up with the first overall pick 2 years in a row. This was the second time in their franchise's history that this happened, and only the 5th time in the history of the NFL. The Browns were historically bad during this time, so it was time to draft their savior. The mock drafts were all over the place, with 4 different quarterbacks being projected to go number 1 overall at one time or another by different outlets. This was not a year with one true outstanding star. Everyone had their favorite, and the Browns' favorite was Baker Mayfield. Coming out of Oklahoma, Baker had been a Heisman finalist twice, winning the coveted trophy in his final year. The Browns decided on Baker because of their love of his efficiency, accuracy, and off-script playmaking ability. The Oklahoma quarterback finished his career as the most efficient arm in NCAA history, sporting a titanic passer rating of 131.1 to go along with a 69.8 completion percentage over 40 appearances as a Sooner. His 6'1 stature was the only downside, but with players like Drew Brees and Russell Wilson having success, more and more teams weren't afraid to draft a QB without prototypical size. As a rookie, he had a solid statistical season. Remember, this team had earned the number 1 overall pick 2 seasons in a row, so adding one player wasn't going to take them to the promised land as a rookie. But they improved to 7-8-1. Baker was a big part of that with some late game heroics and throwing for 1,000 more yards than his predecessor in Cleveland. Baker was also viewed as having great leadership in that it was genuine. He led with passion and by example for his teammates who had learned how to win together. In 2019, Mayfield's second season, there was some slight regression in Baker's game. He was worse in yards per game and touchdowns, however the biggest glaring issue was his increase in interceptions thrown, going from 14 up to 21. This, along with general team issues, led to a 6-10 season. Still, during this time there was very little pointing directly at Baker as the issue. Finally, the 2020 season arrived and it was time for Baker to shine. He seemed to figure it out and prioritize taking care of the ball, while feeding the playmakers on offense so that they can go do what they do. This mindset led them to an 11-5 record, a playoff berth, and eventually a playoff win. Things were moving in the right direction for Cleveland. But then, 2021 happened. There was fighting inside the locker room, primarily from the always outspoken Odell Beckham Jr. Baker was battling a shoulder injury that clearly affected his play. All of this resulted in another losing season, and eventually the Browns trading him to the Panthers after they acquired Deshaun Watson to replace Mayfield. His time in Carolina was brief as he was traded to the Rams mid-season to help finish the season after Matthew Stafford went out with an injury. In 4 games with the Rams, they had a 1-3 record, but Baker showed flashes of his 2020 self. This brings us to the current season, and he's signed with Tampa as a free agent. He'll likely be the Week 1 starter and has some of the best weapons he's had in his career. It's his last chance to prove he is still a starting caliber QB in this league. The next quarterback has played on multiple teams in his short career as well. Sam Darnold was mocked mostly to the Browns at number 1, but when he fell to the 3rd pick, the Jets were all too happy to draft their guy. Prior to the draft starting, the Jets traded up to number 3 with hopes of a QB they liked being available. Darnold fell right in their laps and they believed they had their guy. For Darnold, he started 13 games as a rookie and it was rough from the beginning. He threw for just 17 touchdowns against 15 interceptions and 5 fumbles. He struggled to take care of the ball in every game, and the Jets went 4-9 in Darnold's 13 starts. Sam's second season has been his best to date. He once again only started 13 games, missing 3 games with mono. Statistically, Darnold improved in every category other than his fumbles. He had an insane 11 fumbles in just 13 games. But he had done enough that the Jets felt they could roll with him for one more season. In 2020, Darnold would miss more time with an ankle injury, only starting 12 games and producing a 2-10 record. In these games, he threw for more interceptions than touchdowns and continued the downward spiral. Sam would be traded to the Panthers following the 2020 season as they decided to take a chance on his upside and the draft grade they had on him coming out. Things did not improve in Carolina for Darnold. He missed several games due to various injuries and has not thrown for double-digit touchdowns in either of the last 2 seasons. The Panthers let Sam hit free agency this offseason and he is signed with the San Francisco 49ers. Similar to Baker, if Sam is ever going to be a starting quarterback again, this is the best situation for him to be in. Kyle Shanahan can make any quarterback look their best with high-quality targets like Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Darnold's former teammate Christian McCaffrey. He'll have to battle with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, who will both certainly have the inside track to the starting job, but if past seasons are any hint at what might happen in San Fran, he'll probably get a chance to play due to injuries. Josh Allen was the next quarterback drafted, going 7th to the Bills. Buffalo made the move on draft night to come up from 12 to get their guy. Allen had a wide variety of opinions on him as a prospect due to his questionable accuracy and coming from a lower-level college program but possessing great athletic traits. His rookie season gave opportunities for both sides of the argument to feel they were correct in their evaluation of Allen. He showed his cannon of an arm with some great deep balls, and he ran for over 600 yards. He also had more interceptions than touchdowns and only completed 52% of his passes. Entering year 2, there would need to be proof that he was moving in the right direction, or he'd end up in a similar situation to Darnold and Mayfield. Well, it got better quickly. He improved in every stat and led the Bills back to the playoffs for just the second time since 2000. Allen had turned the team around, but was still just a middle-of-the-pack quarterback. And although he'd been improving, nobody, not even the people who graded him as the best quarterback of the 2018 draft, could have predicted his meteoric rise in year 3. Allen threw for 1,500 more yards and 17 more touchdowns at an 11% higher completion rating than he did his year prior while continuing his rushing efficiency. The Bills finished with the second best record in the league at 13-3, just behind the Chiefs at 14-2. Buffalo went all the way to the AFC Championship game, losing out to Kansas City, but they clearly had their franchise cornerstone in Allen. The last 2 seasons have been more of the same, throwing for over 35 touchdowns in each year and continuing the winning ways. The only thing left to prove is that he can get Buffalo its first Super Bowl championship. The next quarterback taken is the polar opposite of Allen. Josh Rosen might have the worst career of any quarterback selected in the top 10 in history. I'm including the likes of Jamarcus Russell and Ryan Leaf. Rosen played on 3 different teams in 3 years, only starting 16 games, with an overall record of 3-13, with 12 career touchdowns, 21 interceptions, and 11 fumbles. He has a career completion percentage of just 54%. The craziest thing is that after going 3-10 as a starter for the Cardinals and showing no real evidence of being a future star or even competent starter in the league, the Miami Dolphins gave up a 2nd and a 5th round pick to get Rosen. They very quickly realized that this was a mistake when they decided Ryan Fitzpatrick was their far better option to win games in 2019. Rosen would be released the following offseason and has signed on to and been released from various practice squads and regular rosters since then, never starting another game and only appearing in limited backup action for the Falcons. Worst top 10 quarterback in history. Which brings us to possibly the best 32nd overall pick in history, Lamar Jackson. He, like Josh Allen, had critics that felt he wasn't going to be successful in the NFL. He even had multiple teams try to convince him to switch to running back or wide receiver because of his impressive athletic ability. The Ravens, however, saw this great potential and decided to move up to get him so they could have that 5th-year option. Joe Flacco had been the Ravens' QB for quite a while and had won a Super Bowl MVP following the 2012 season, but he was getting older and his production was slipping. Baltimore needed a contingency plan, and it turned out it was needed sooner than they expected. Lamar got his first start as a rookie following the bye week, and he got to work immediately, leading the Ravens to a win over the division rival Bengals, rushing for over 100 yards. Lamar wasn't blowing anyone away yet with his passing numbers, but what he was doing on the ground hadn't been seen since the likes of Atlanta Falcons' Mike Vick. The Ravens closed out the regular season under Jackson, going 6-1 and securing a playoff spot. They lost to the Chargers in the wildcard round, but the hype was real for Lamar. It was in his second season that Jackson would show the world what he's capable of. He led the Ravens to a 13-2 record and was able to just sit out the last week of the season as they had already locked up the top seed in the playoffs. Greg Roman, the Ravens' new offensive coordinator, had designed an entire offense around Jackson's strengths, and it was working flawlessly. Jackson threw for 36 touchdowns on over 66% completions, with only 6 interceptions. That's before you even factor in the rushing numbers. He ran for 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. He led the league in touchdowns thrown and was 6th in the league in rushing regardless of position. He was the easiest MVP vote ever. However, the Ravens would lose to the 9-7 Tennessee Titans in the divisional round of the playoffs, leaving Jackson without a playoff win through 2 seasons. He would get his first playoff win the following season after an 11-4 record as a starter, continuing to put up good numbers and get wins. Now, the last 2 seasons for Lamar have been tough due to injury, missing a total of 10 games during that stretch. Many think he could have come back and played at the end of last season, but was holding out until he got his new contract. Well, he has finally cashed in on the second biggest contract in NFL history. A 32nd pick, well spent.